a daily podcast that shines a light on the American justice system and its role in empowering the powerful to take from you. The justice system is the only branch of your government where an individual, rather than the collective, can make the system act for you. It puts power in the individual's hands, but it's broken and being used against you at a time when you need it most.
And welcome to Who Wrote That Up For You. I'm Sonia Ebrin, a co-founder at Courtroom 5.
And I'm Deborah Sloan, the other co-founder at Courtroom 5.
Wonderful show lined up for you today. In a few moments, we're going to speak with Robert Songer at L&S Investigations out of East Tennessee. Robert is a private investigator there doing a wide variety of work. We're excited to find out how he works and what he works on. Before we get there, Deborah, what is on your mind today?
Evictions. I want to talk about evictions in a number of different ways. There's a story out of San Diego Superior Court about just the overwhelming number of evictions. I mean, it's more than double sometimes what they typically have, mostly because of the COVID people. And this is what we kind of expected it back in 2020 that back in 2020 that there would be a flooding of the eviction court. And then there's a in New York City, there's a right to counsel. There's an actual right to counsel for eviction cases, and they have 10,000 cases that have been denied that right to counsel because there are so many eviction cases. And so it's really a sad situation when basically across the country there's just been an eviction crisis, and a lot of people can't do anything about their situation, and that's particularly sad in New York, where they have this law where you're supposed to get a counsel, and they're turning away so many people.
Yeah, and there and are in many states and counties eviction moratoria where you can't evict someone because of the pandemic. And we've seen, just because of the scale of this crisis, the ending of those moratoria be delayed. I learned earlier today, I think it's Los Angeles County has delayed the ending of its moratorium for another month. And it's a strain on both sides, landlords and tenants. There are people who are needing to relying on that income
Yeah.
and having to find other ways to maintain their own properties and their own residences because they don't have rental income on some of these properties. And it's just a really difficult. This is where you expect your government to step in when you have a market failure of this scale, and particularly around something as important as housing, when we already have such a horrible homelessness crisis in the country. Anyway, I won't rant there, but I appreciate you bringing that up. It is a really bad problem and increasingly difficult for people to handle. So, yeah. All right. At Courtroom 5, we believe the courts belong to the people, in particular to the people who use them. And we, the people, are coming to claim our courts. So if you are in court without a lawyer, or you need to sue someone and can't find a lawyer to represent you, get yourself over to courtroom5.com. Try a limited version of our services for free, and we hope to provide some relief for you there. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome Robert Songer at L&S Investigations, private investigator in East Tennessee. Robert, thank you for joining us on Who Wrote That Up For You.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Robert, if you would, tell us your background and what got you into the private investigation space.
Sure. I spent over 20 years in law enforcement in the state of Nevada, retiring with an injury. In 2011, I wasn't ready to retire, but didn't have a choice. So I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and I had a lot of training and experience behind me. So I decided, hey, I'm going to be a gumshoe. I'm going to be a private investigator because it ought to be really easy because I've been a cop for so long, right? Well, it wasn't. It was a different world, which is a world I've done for over the last 10 years as a PI. I started in Washington and Oregon. And Washington, Oregon, I covered a lot of different cases involving criminal cases, worked for defense attorneys to represent them and their clients. And after moving from Washington State to the state of Tennessee, we opened up L&S Investigations and been operating since 2019.
And East Tennessee, if I remember my geography right, is the Nashville area. Is that about right, or is it broader than that?
Well, I think it'd be a little
Yes,
broader
yes.
than that. Actually, it's more than Knoxville,
Yeah.
Knoxville, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, all those areas. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so you're operating now in the Knoxville area. What types of cases do you find yourself serving or working on?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of the cases that we develop, we do a majority of everything: criminal, civil, and domestic related type, cases. Criminal cases is usually brought on by an attorney to assist them with litigation process, and by doing witness interviews or locates, or even the sneaky peek, legalized peep and tom surveillance jobs. Where we go out there and we don't put on a ghillie suit, but close to it. We might sit in a car with a video camera or in a restaurant watching people and that type. That relates to a lot of domestic. Skip locates is an interesting topic because there's an old saying that I heard a long time ago, and I love using it. You can run, but you can't hide. You can run wherever you want, but I guarantee I'll locate you eventually. And there's a process out there of doing that, and that's a whole nother show because that's a whole process of skip locates. But it's an interesting one. We do civil service. I noticed in the beginning you talked about evictions. We have conducted some evictions, or we've assisted attorneys and that kind of stuff with that. A lot of court type related matters that we go out and serve papers on. And a lot of people feel that serving papers, oh, that sounds like a piece of cake. And that could be a very dangerous situation. If somebody don't want those divorce papers, they're going to get a little aggressive. Some people, they really want them pretty bad, so they're going to invite you in their home for a cup of coffee or a sandwich or something like that because you're bringing them good news, so that's a good thing, But mainly on our team here in East Tennessee, we have a financial investigator that he works with the company at times. He's a retired IRS agent, so he definitely knows how to do financial crimes. And then we have a guy that does forensics. He does all our computer forensics when it comes to cell phones, computers, laptops, iPads, all that. And that's another thing that I should throw out there, just so I've learned from experience. If you think you've deleted something off your phone or your computer, it's never gone. We pulled it, we're working an active homicide case, and we used the victim's cell phone, and we downloaded all the information, and there was over 75,000 text messages. And that phone we were able to pull information from the time he activated that phone, which has
Wow.
been 5-6 years. So, just a word for advice. So, people out there, they're deleting stuff, it's not always gone. So you got
That's
to be
true.
careful what you're doing. So,
That is really
but
interesting. Very broad range of services you have there. Didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
sure. No, I was just feeding off the thought with investigations. I have found that when I was a law enforcement, it was easy for me to obtain information on people because all I had to do is pick up the radio and call in your name. And in the private investigation world, it's a whole different ballgame. as I said before. In this avenue, we have to research and we have to document and we have to, pull different avenues or different ways that we know resources to obtain that information. To get the same information I used to get just a click of a mic, not no more. But it makes it very rewarding when we develop evidence that helps a case. The one thing I will say in doing defense investigations, when I'm working a criminal defense investigation, the one thing I'll say is I usually tell the client and I tell the attorney, when I take on a case, I'm very biased of this case. I'm in the middle. It's going to go where it goes. If it shows that it's very active and very good for the client, that's fantastic for the client and that attorney. But if it doesn't, I'm still going to report the same information that I obtained, because that goes along with ethics in doing your investigations. You need to be truthful and honest with the people. And not only that, I think if we're able to, even if it's bad news to the attorney, it gives that attorney he or she to be able to represent their client in court based off the information we provided them.
Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you there. I imagine oftentimes you will have people who don't have an attorney, but who do need some evidence collected, and want to have a private investigator do that work. What's your advice to them? How should they? Uh, what's your advice to them?
Well, my advice would be is if you're going to hire a private investigator and it's dealing with a criminal or domestic matter, you need to have an attorney. And the reason for having an attorney is the fact that you keep that client privilege information. And it means that way it stays between you and the attorney and not everybody else out there that it make it discoverable. Because there's some information out there, obviously, if you discover something through your investigation that you don't want everybody to know. You just want maybe that attorney to know. Now, there are times that a person might call you up and say, well, I don't really need an attorney, but can you obtain this information for me? And I explain to them, sure, I could do that for you. I can put my best foot forward and make that happen. But you are not protected by any privilege. If I discover information that results to something that isn't so good for you as in a criminal case, then that prosecutor has a right to ask my information, receive my information as discoverable for court.
That
With
is
an
really
attorney,
important.
with an attorney, they really don't,
Yeah.
and because that attorney protects that privilege. So.
That's really, really important point. One I hadn't considered in the past. I appreciate you sharing that. So Robert, again, you've got just a broad range of experience and services there. I imagine you find yourself you're probably very, very busy, and you probably have a team that is growing. How do you all manage your time? Right. And you want to do this for the benefit of your clients for sure, to minimize the cost. But are there procedures that you follow to make sure that your time, which is your primary resource that you're selling there, goes to the most effective places?
Yes, ma'am. One of the biggest things that we do is when we sit down with a client, we don't charge the client for sitting down and talking to them, about a case. That usually the charge don't start until we actually start working the investigation. What I will tell a client is the more information you can provide for me, the easier it is for my team to go out and provide this investigation and collect whatever evidence or whatever needs to be collected at that time. The one thing that to me is important is time management. You have to, I can tell you, since I've been a private investigator for over 10 years, I've lived off a schedule. And what I'll do is if I have several cases, which I do today, have several cases, I will book out my calendar for the week that I'll spend an hour or two block on each case throughout the week. That way, each client that I have is being benefited throughout the week with my services, whether it's me or one of the other investigators that is assisting with it. So.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so, do you find yourself having to, once you've collected your evidence for a client, and that may be discoverable or not, do you find yourself having to actually testify in court around that evidence?
Absolutely. And that is something that uh, prior law enforcement really helps out a lot, because I had to testify like all the time, during that period of my life. So testifying in court is I just say that's one of your duties as a private investigator. If you're going to be working any domestic cases or criminal cases, you can be sure that at some point you're going to have to testify in court. And I think the important thing is, along with time management, is make sure you document everything that you've done during your investigation. Because there's an old saying out there that I learned years ago from a training officer. He had told me, he said, if it wasn't documented, it never happened.
That's
So
fantastic.
you have to make sure you document your activities, your reports, your whatever interviews, whatever you're doing throughout that investigation, you make sure you document it 100%.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me go back just briefly then to the person who reaches you and doesn't have an attorney. And I take your point very, very, very strongly there about the privilege issue. But let's say
Right.
this is somebody who can't afford an attorney, and they need some evidence collected nonetheless. Do you work with them in a different way than you would work with someone who is represented?
I would be a little bit careful with them, um, because I know that they're not protected,
Yeah,
by any kind of privilege. So the way I've handled that in the past is, if we have obtained information that we know that could be either beneficial or harmful to their investigation, I will reach out to them and say, listen, I've got this information here. You definitely need an attorney. And I will, maybe give them a list of people I know that work that type of cases. And so that way they can reach out. And some of those might do it pro bono, I don't know, and some of them, might charge them a minimum. But usually, if I'm going to request somebody put that out, potentially have to put out that kind of money for an attorney, then I've got some evidence that's going to be supporting that,
yeah.
be important for them to do that. So,
That's great. That is fantastic. Fantastic. So, Robert, I'm going to share your website on the screen for our viewers, lndsinvestigations.com. Where else can people find you online?
well, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook. Both, I think that's pretty much it. We looked at Twitter at one time, and then there was so much, you know, stuff going on about Twitter. I was like, I don't even want to be a part of that. So,
Especially these days. Yep.
yeah, oh yeah. I believe in boots on the ground. I believe in getting out there and making contact with potential clients, whether that means I have to take an attorney out to lunch or coffee or something of that nature. We've put our name, like for instance, one I just did recently. I've done an advertisement on this neighborhood thing, and it's online. I think it's associated with like Facebook or something like that. But it's out there for people to understand. Hey, a private investigator is not there just to go spy on your ex or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. He's there. He might be able there to do interview witnesses. He might be able to do interviews on witnesses. He might be able to collect information. Or we're working a traffic accident that happened September of last year in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And we went out. We've taken a bunch of photos. We canvassed a neighborhood, all the businesses. We were able to find video. We were able to find independent witnesses that these people were never contacted during the initial investigation. And it's not really a criminal, but what it can be is, if there's a civil lawsuit pending, it could definitely be helpful for the client with all this information. So
it is so important. What you all do as private investigators is so important because evidence is really what matters, particularly in civil cases, criminal cases, anytime you're dealing with litigation. And so you're absolutely right. If you are involved in any kind of litigation, regardless of whether the state is on your side or not, you better get yourself some independent investigation. So really appreciate what you do. Robert Songer at LNS Investigations in Knoxville, Tennessee. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have you on again. Continued good luck in your career.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. Thanks. Bye now.
Fantastic. I
That's
always
great.
I always really enjoy talking to private investigators. There's just a broad range of talents and skills and the types of work that they do. But they all are about getting that evidence, and they have their particular ways of doing that. So very, very
and
happy to
and
chat with Robert. Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with the ethics part. I think the courts won't work right if people like Robert or people like Robert just said, okay, well, we're going to do what we want to do. Forget the
Yeah,
ethics.
exactly.
It matters the
A great
process you go
deal.
through to this. Yeah,
A
yeah.
great deal. That's right.
Okay,
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, what's our quiz answers for the last time and what you got teed up?
okay. Here's the answer. Which of the following is the most accurate statement about venue in legal terms? And it is A, venue is the location where a case takes place. There was a B, where venue is the state in which the courthouse is located. That's typically probably you're thinking of jurisdiction when you think about the state or the federal district. C, venue is the jurisdiction in which a case is being tried. And venue and jurisdiction are very, very close, but they're not the same thing. And venue is the legal jurisdiction in which the case was filed. That's totally wrong. So it's definitely A. It's just the location. And hopefully when you select a venue, if you're the plaintiff, you're going to select somewhere that's close to the defendant. Okay, so today's question. It's a true or false. It's easy. A motion to dismiss is a response to a complaint. True or false? A motion to dismiss is a response to a complaint.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing the answer to that one then. Uh, all right. Well, that's all we have for you today. As always, thanks for joining us on Who Wrote That Up for You, and we will see you next time.
Are you feeling beleaguered, angry, or afraid, as if things are spinning out of control and you're powerless to stop them? It's easy to just let things slide and hope they don't get worse. But they often do get worse. The thing is, you're not powerless. Our courts belong to us, and their purpose is to give power to the powerless. Don't let your grievances pile up without redressing them. You can handle this in court. Or, if someone takes you to court, you can take them to school.